Well, hello, amazing parents, and welcome back to our series on instant toddler obedience. We are in the heart of how you teach your child to be obedient instantly and permanently. And in the last video, I shared with you the first experience I had with this when my son was 2 weeks old, and I taught him to be a good eater for life, just in a few interactions over a period of about 48 hours. And so in this video, I'm going to share with you the time when the Lord walked me through teaching him to be obedient specifically. And this is just as profound, if not more than the last one. So fast forward from when he was 2 weeks old, about a year and a half to maybe 20 months later. He was just under about 2 years old, I think, when this took place. And at the time, he had this obsession with tipping things over. And anything that was not nailed down that he could move, he would tip over. And that included things like lamps and portable stereos and things like that, things that we had back in that day, 20 years ago, before all of our music was electronic. But he just had some sort of mental itch he was scratching by tipping things over. And he wasn't doing it to be destructive or mean or ugly or anything like that. He had a fascination with it. There was some sort of fascination with seeing things tip over. Maybe he was learning about gravity. I have no idea. So I had moved or anything that could be dangerous or tippable, as we called it, out of reach for the most part. And there was one thing left that was in reach that I couldn't move out of reach, and it was my piano bench. And most chairs are not, you can't tip them over because the way they're made, but a piano bench is top heavy because there's music stored in the seat, and then it's on these four little thin legs. So if you get that past its center of gravity just a little bit, it tips over. And so I had told him, don't tip over my piano bench, and he had tipped it a few times, and thankfully he didn't hurt himself, but it had broken the hinges, and they were getting rather worn and fragile. And so I had warned him, don't tip over my piano bench, right? Like a 2-year-old or less than 2-year-old with Down syndrome is going to remember that, right? And now that I know what I know about cognitive development, even a normal 18 to 20-month-old is not going to remember not to do those things that you tell them not to do. And so I come in the living room one day, and there's my piano bench tipped over, and the lid is hanging on by its last thread. And my son is across the room. He's moved on to something else. He's happily playing. He's probably completely forgotten about the piano bench. And, I walk in and I'm like exasperated. I say, Jonathan, I told you not to tip over my piano bench. And of course he hears, he's over, like I said, distracted with something else now. And he hears me and he turns around like, what's wrong with her? And he looks at me and I said, come over here right now. And he goes, no. He just shook his head. And I said, you come over here right now. And, we get more demanding. We insert their middle name, which I did, and thinking that has more, effect. And I'm just, by this time I've got my hands on my hip and I've got that stern mom face and voice. And I'm like, you come over here right now. I told you not to do this. And I went on with our, our typical response of our flesh and how we normally respond in our flesh to the external circumstance. And the more I pressed him, the more he resisted. And he would turn, after several, commands from me, he had his arms crossed, his back towards me, and he's looking over his shoulder going, like, I'm not coming over there. No way. And so I see this and I just kind of, dropped my my guard. And I said to myself, Lord, I don't know what to do. I've never had a Downs child before. And like I said, this really applies to all 2-year-olds because the way we approach it doesn't work for any of them, right? And immediately I heard the Lord say, tell him he's obedient. And I thought, what? And then I remembered back to when he was 2 weeks old, and the Lord had told me to tell him he was a good eater. And I thought, oh yeah, I remember that. I wonder if it'll work now. And so I tried to gain my composure. I was honestly upset because my piano bench was my piano was pretty special to me, and it was the one nice thing I had and that I owned, and so I was, I was truly, disturbed by this loss. I mean, it wasn't a complete loss, but it was a nice thing. You want to keep it nice, right? And now it's broken. And so, I mean, I could still stand it up and set the lid on there, but the hinges weren't really attached anymore. And so, so I tried to gain my composure as much as I could. And I took a deep breath and I said, pasted kind of a phony smile on my face. And I said, Jonathan, you're so obedient. And immediately I saw a response in him that was different. It was like he perked up. Like, what was that? That's a different sound. And I saw that, and that gave me confidence. And so I relaxed more, and I said it again. And this time I had more belief and conviction in my voice. And I said, you're so obedient, Jonathan. And he turns around. Remember, he had his back to me and he's looking over his shoulder and shaking his head. He turns around and faces me. So I'm watching this and I'm seeing this and I'm knowing, because God told me to do this, that there was something going on. And so now I'm just like, I can't wait to see what's going to happen. And I said to him, now I'm smiling and my face is lit up. And I said, you're so obedient. You always do what mommy says. And I'm telling you, he looked at me. He bursts into a grin from ear to ear. His face lights up. He runs across the room and flings his arms around my neck. And every time I think about that, I get a little choked up, because it was so incredible. But not only that, I realized that he was waiting for me to tell him who he really is, to tell him who he truly was. And that's what's going on here, is our children are waiting for us to activate and call forth their true identity and to tell them who they really are. And yet we're spending all of our time telling them what they're doing that isn't acceptable. And we're sending these messages of, you're not good enough, you don't measure up, you're not doing what I want. And it's destroying them. It's activating their knowledge of good and evil, which is what separated Adam and Eve from God. And it's closing down their heart. Their heart is, because it hurts. It hurts when they hear things that are contrary to what God has written in their heart. And so they shut down, they close off. We create this wall between us and them. And we wonder why they're so resistant. We can't gain their cooperation. And then they get to be teenagers and we've never told them who they really are. And they're craving it. They're craving for us to call forth their true identity. And so what happened next was, I was just astonished by what happened. And it was so profound that it stuck with me. So did he obey every time I told him something after that? Almost. So for about 2 weeks after that initial interaction, what would happen is I would say, Jonathan, pick up your toys or whatever. And he would say, no. And I would say, sorry, a little bit allergies. I would ignore the no. We're going to talk about that specifically in another video. But we think that no is resistance and rebellion, and it's not. It's a healthy developmental stage. And I'll explain more about that in another video. So I knew that. So I ignored the no. And I just reminded him. I said, Jonathan, you're so obedient. You always do what mommy says. And I would say it as I was going about whatever I was doing. I would just continue to do what I was doing. I wouldn't even look at him as if, watching him to see if he was going to obey. No, I said it as if I expected him to go do what I told him to do. And I did. That was my attitude. Like, I know you're obedient. God told me you were. And so I would just continue cooking or cleaning up or folding clothes, whatever I was doing. And I would just say, "You're so obedient, Jonathan. You always do what mommy says." And then I'd go back to my task. And then he would go do it. And I was like, wow. And sometimes maybe not the first, but most of the time it was just, I just had to say that. And he would do what I said. Sometimes I'd reinforce it if he stood there. I gave him a few seconds to respond because his response time was a little bit longer. And that could be true for any 2-year-old, not just a Downs 2-year-old. But I wouldn't, just like expect that, like push a button. They're not robots. Just give them a minute for it to settle in their heart. Oh yeah, that's right. I'm so obedient. And he would go do it. Occasionally, I would say, "You're so obedient. You always do it." I'd say it again if I noticed he was still standing there and not going. But I wouldn't, like watch him. Like, I'm going to believe you're obedient when I see you be obedient. Remember, we're walking by faith. We believe it before we see it. And it's that faith in our heart that also sends that message, that vibrational frequency to the child that, oh, she believes I'm obedient, which causes them to believe it. And so more, it's a combination of our faith and theirs that really creates the results. I'll give you an example. So I had a woman she had a 7-year-old, and this will work with older children. It's just so much easier in that first 3 years. But older children have already, they've already got some cognitive development, and they have more memory, and they can evaluate things. She was probably 7 or 8 years old, and her mom went through my workshop, not this one, but where I talk about this. And so the mom had not been diligent about attending all the lessons, and she thought, oh, I'm going to try this because her daughter was running her life. And so one day she just said, "Oh, you're so obedient." And her daughter goes, "No, I'm not." And the mom came back to me and she goes, "It doesn't work." And that's why I spend so much time giving you understanding of what's going on, of why the old method doesn't work, of how our children are wired, and what actually needs to take place, and how we are actually creating the results. Remember, the experience or the circumstance plus our response equals the outcome, and the only variable is that we control is our response. And so she had just heard that particular lesson and had not really understood the whole process. And so she tries to say that without any conviction in her own heart, without any, anything else going on. And so that's what I wanted to say, is that, it's important that you really understand that God has created our children to be obedient. He's created them in his image, and he's not disobedient, and he's not rebellious or defiant or disrespectful. And so we have to have that understanding. We have to have that in our heart in order to transmit that to our children's heart through our words, because out of our heart our mouth speaks. And if we're saying words that aren't true to what's in our heart, they're not going to be effective. So anyway, I hope that was helpful, and that you're gonna now go and try this. Now I also want to say that the Holy Spirit led me through this. Is it going to be exactly the same for you? No, you need to listen to the Lord, ask him to lead you. The Holy Spirit was given to us when we believed to lead us into all truth. And so let the Holy Spirit lead you. Your circumstance that you're gonna try this in and use this method in is going to be different than mine, probably. I don't know. They're all pretty much the same, aren't they? We say something and they don't want to do it. But just be sensitive to how the Lord leads you through your experience, so that it's not this cookie cutter, oh, I just tell him he's obedient. Maybe it's something else the Lord wants you to say. I don't know. But I think it's interesting. I wanted to say this before I close this video, is that obedient was not a word that I used in my household. I won't go into why, but it just wasn't a word in our vocabulary. And even if my son had heard that word before, at less than 2 years old with Down syndrome, I don't know that he would understand the meaning of it, but I know he didn't understand the meaning of the word. It wasn't the word. That's why I'm saying just go with your heart. Use the words that you feel led to use, because it's what's in your heart that you're transmitting through your words when you speak from your heart. And so make sure that you are not being phony or superficial, like the one mom who just said the words, but in her heart she didn't understand what she was doing, or she didn't have that faith to create what she wanted. And so when I learned this, I didn't have any prep work either, except for the Lord had been teaching me about some parenting concepts all my life. But this particular understanding that I'm teaching you in this series, I didn't really understand all this. But because the Lord spoke it to me, it was in my heart. That's where the Lord speaks to us. So I was speaking what was in my heart. So just be mindful of that. I really haven't, it's not that difficult. I've had parents change specific behaviors instantly, overnight. I think I'll tell you one story in the next video. But yeah, just be true to yourself. Don't try to be me. Be yourself. That's what I'm saying. And let your child be himself, and be present in the moment, and let the Spirit guide you. So we're not done yet. You can go try this out. I encourage you to do that. But I do have a couple more videos for you. In the next video, I'm going to talk about some things to be mindful of that will affect the outcome of this if you aren't mindful of them. And so until then, take care and God bless, and I'll see you in the next video.